Welcome, folks, to the Reason RX podcast with your co-host, Michael, and your other co-host,
Melanie.
So, today, we are going to, again, talk to the great, the one and only, the ingenious, the flexible, the movable, the strong, Danny Clark of MovNat. Welcome back, Danny.
Oh, thank you for having me. That's quite an intro. Much appreciated. Very generous.
And deserved, yep.
Yeah, sorry I played you down a little bit, but, sometimes if you tell the truth, it seems like exaggeration and people might be thrown off and not believe it. Say, yeah, but, so I got to play it down.
I have a lot to live up to now, but I try.
So, again, Danny's in MovNat, and of course, it's not irrelevant to human beings because we got to look holistically at people. Part of the problem we have nowadays is people looking at education divorced from everything else as if we're some rational rock or if we're some kind of mind divorced from everything else. We're rational animals. To know how someone really learns, how we remember, how we're creative, to really get that, we got to look at the whole person. We got to take everything into account. If people think that all that matters is learning a bunch of stuff, well, then you try to do nothing but read a book and study for 500 hours straight. I'll tell you, it ain't going to happen. You're going to be dead before that happens because, from sleep deprivation. All these microsleeps and all this other stuff will go on. Ain't going to work. 500 hours to be 20 days, yeah, at least 20 days. So, over. So that'd be right. People couldn't last that long. But, sleep, exercise, movement, diet. That's another one. What? Can we just learn and it doesn't matter what we eat, the brain's going to magically function? I don't think so. There's certain specific things our bodies and brains need to form neurons, to form memories, end of story, period. You can't get around it. That stuff matters. You got to look at the whole child. We need time in nature and everything. We're dynamic, non-linear. There's a lot of feedback involved in how we function and operate. So stuff Danny does and the stuff we do is important. We need to move to live better, to learn better. Would you agree, Danny?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think movement's one of those things that we've sort of put in a box, in a category that's just something that we need to do to look a certain way, or because our doctor or the studies we've read or whatever, or whoever told us that it's a good thing to do for a lot of people. But it's so much more than that, right?
Yeah.
It's so tied to our health, our clarity of being, our ability to see clearly, our ability to think clearly, our ability to live fully and richly. So that's why it's such a big part of, that's why for me it's something that I feel compelled to teach, that I'm passionate about, that I finally found something that had a lot of meaning to me personally to teach. Yeah.
Yeah, agree. But then as you say, it's more than those stuff. It's not that some of those things are bad. Oh my gosh, you care about how you look. That's so horrible. No. It's especially for some people at some ages. I mean, what a lot of people are about in their 20s, looking good for each other. But we're social animals. That's part of it.
Totally.
There's certain things, look good for other people and stuff like that. Like big whip. Good. Go for it, please. But, yeah, just, the point is there's a whole lot more that we get out of it. There's more reasons we need it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. It's not about moralizing it or making it better than, or it's just about wholeness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's about the idea that fitness is regenerative and healing in a lot of ways, because it's something that's lost in our culture.
Yeah, very.
They're totally suppressed at an early age, and we become sedentary because our culture is sedentary. Or it's turned into something very linear and rigid that fundamentally isn't linear and rigid. It's something that's dynamic, something that can't exist fully just in a vacuum in a gym either. So, think that's...
Would you say, Danny, that certain exercises are just good for everybody, or that each individual is kind of a unique biological organism that requires maybe a different kind of exercise?
Well, I definitely think everybody is a unique biological organism. I would agree with that, but there's also things that bind us as a species, right? Mm-hmm. That link us together, that we have this form, and that form, we have to respect that there's profound differences in that form. Some people, just body proportion wise, are better suited for certain movements like running or whatever, or muscle anatomy wise, having more power naturally than endurance. And I think that it's good to play up your strengths, what you're naturally good at and made to do, because I think as an organism, as a species, as social animals, we all had roles. We always have. We can't ignore that thing. We can't ignore that reality. And we shouldn't try to make everybody say you should move in this certain way. But at the same time, there are things that link us that when movements are lost, that's the issue. When we're not able to do something like walk, run, jump, climb, squat, sit, all these things, like that's what we're looking for from the MovNat lens, is like, what have you lost because of culture?
Yeah.
How do we bring it back, at least to a level that isn't necessarily going to wow anybody? It's not about performance or being an athlete to these high standards or looking a certain way. It's just about how do we make sure everything is at least functioning at a baseline level, not just joint function, but movement ability, the ability to engage in your world and not take things off the table. Because so much of our culture teaches us that, past a certain age, jumping kind of isn't good for you. It's unhealthy, or it's unhealthy to twist a certain way, or it's unhealthy to do this. And it's not really true. It's kind of, it's a false thing that's based on the fact that we've become so degenerated that it becomes normal to things that should be healthy aren't, because we're in such a degenerated state.
Yeah. And bad ideas.
Yeah.
Some bad ideas in the culture, bad philosophy about human nature and what's possible and what we're like and what our environment should be like. Some good ideas too. I'm not saying everything's bad, clearly. Otherwise we'd all be dead and suffering, but some ideas are good, but there's some that we need to change, get rid of.
Yeah, and I think at the root of it, someone like, Daniel Vitalis in his podcast talked about, his old podcast, Rewild Yourself, talked about the baseline wildness taboo that we have. Our divorcement from nature stems from our fear of nature. Mm-hmm. And that, a lot of that is about control. There's a lot of deeper issues. There's a lot of things that percolate into our culture that reinforce that, and are used to control us. So, there's our culture isn't, I'm not like an anti-civilization, anti-culture person. I think it's just like we have to re-examine our relationship with nature and the world around us to enhance how we engage in the world and how we function as a culture. Yeah. That would be my perspective anyway.
So like you said last time, what we have to do in a lot of things is figure out the history of an idea. We shouldn't just take it as fact, like we take the sun rising or the earth under our feet. We got to think for different ideas, one idea at a time or a little bit at a time. We got to, just like MovNat, it's in its development, it's got logical progressions. Same thing here. We got to, in our ideas, in our mind, the way it functions, we got to look at logical progressions and do a thing at a time. So, analyze a few ideas, see where they come from, do a few others, go back to those first few, do a few new ones, go back to the second few, do more. But yeah, we got to think about where do some of these ideas come from about why. Okay, I go to the gym all the time. Why? Why do I go to the gym instead of do something else? Is it good? Or even if I do go to a gym, is it like MovNat or CrossFit stuff, or is it just like a conventional gym where we're like adapting ourselves to a machine?
Right.
and why are houses so close together? Wouldn't it be good if we had more, like, greenery in between them? And stuff like that. But, yeah.
I totally agree. And I think it parallels our species progression in thought, right? Like, from seeing ourselves as machines to now, I think biology is kind of like becoming the new science in a lot of ways, instead of pure just physics, understanding the greater systems that work together, the ecology that create the world and create ourselves, right? So I think we're starting to, hopefully, or new trains of thought that I see even emerging within science, see synthesis, see integration, synergy, and not so much like machine-like reduction.
Yeah.
I think the reason people go to machines is because we view ourselves as machines and we have a very mechanical worldview. And I think that that's changing over time, very slowly, as things do. But I think that the greater understanding of the world is just, as science progresses, you look at even something like epigenetics and how that has changed our profound worldview of what DNA is and what we are as a species, how there's an ongoing communication with our environment that shapes us instead of just this rigid, locked-in, machine-like DNA executed program, right?
Yeah. And then some of it, too, is there's some machine-like stuff. One important thing, too, if people start to look at some ideas, it's why it's important to study philosophy, see where things come from. Just like a quote I heard in a podcast on biology recently. It was really good just listening to this today. And let me snatch this really quickly here. I'll read it out. Okay, so this guy, Dennis Noble, was being interviewed on this podcast called the Big Biology Podcast, and they say that there are things about looking at big ideas in biology. This is episode 2, Harnessing Randomness. It was like at the first 5 minutes or so, I forget exactly, but Dennis Noble says, so he's talking about a debate involving 2 scientists and 2 philosophers, and then so here we start the quote. Richard Dawkins said, I'm not a philosopher, I'm a scientist. I'm only interested in the truth. Then a Frenchman in the audience stood up and said, what is truth? Unquote. Do you get the point? So the point is...
Yes.
The point is, I'm only interested in truth. Well, what is the truth? Sorry, dude, but that's a philosophic question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Science is about what is, like, asking and answering, is this particular fact true? How do I know this particular thing? That's part of science, because we do that in everyday life a lot, too. But philosophy is what is truth, not is this particular thing true? What is truth? It's not how do I know this particular thing, it's how do I know? Sorry, but that's philosophy. Everyone needs philosophy. It's important. Or like E.O. Wilson, the great biologist, said, only a few people are philosopher-scientists. Most of them are journeymen. This is like a general quote, not exact. Most of them are journeymen, looking here and there, trying to find a discovery, only concerned about the immediate moment. We need more philosopher-scientists. There's a big thing in physics that's bad. A lot of people in physics think, well, philosophy just messes us up. It's bad, it's irrelevant, it's stupid, wrong. Besides, philosophy is a science itself. Philosophy is a science, physics is a science, and philosophy is behind them all, telling us what's the difference between biology and physics and chemistry. How do they relate? What's the general ideas that we deal with in everyday life, even if we're not having our quote-unquote like physics hat on. But you go back and look at Plato, Aristotle, some other people, it's very important to see how Plato's influencing us today. Just because he lived 2,000 years ago doesn't mean anything. Education, some stuff we're talking about now, about how we live and how we divorce exercise from our everyday life and not really integrate things enough. Some of the stuff, back to Plato and people influenced by him. So, yes, We got to dig into some philosophy. It helps us. It's good. Look at the history of ideas, not just take things like out of context.
I would agree with all that. I think that there needs to be more synthesis. We always have to put our big question, even our small questions back into the bigger picture of what is the meaning, what are these fundamental existential questions that people have been asking forever since the beginning of time. What is this thing we call life? What does it mean? What's going on here? What is happening? Because realistically, we still really don't know much. We know a lot, but we still don't know.
Yeah,
so
immature.
It's
species.
more and more stuff comes out, and it points in different directions than we expected, and that's the beauty of it. There's a lot to study and learn. And so I think that philosophy is the central science. Have meaning in some way, right?
True. And thank goodness. Like another thing comes up when you mention that. There's epigenetics. It'd be good for people to look into that. That's another quote I want to get from a podcast that I'm listening to on Big Biology. I haven't got the guy's name yet, but this guy said, it said genetics, genes by themselves don't do crap. That's a quote.
Right. Yeah.
It depends on the room and environment they're in. So that's our epigenetics. That's how we move. Genes don't, of course they have some influence, but it's like, take genes alone, put them somewhere, put them in space, nothing.
Right.
Like an example people have is, you can get a bunch of bricks, or you can, and you can lay them on the ground, but does that make a house? No.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like the genes, the genes alone are not a biological organism, just like bricks aren't a house on their own.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of our worldview comes from, we've gone through a phase of thinking we can reduce and figure everything out by knowing the smallest parts of things. And there's truth in that, but there's also greater levels of complexity that are hard to understand because it's just complicated. There's so many, the interface between our smallest parts and the big world around us there's a lot in between those two spaces, right? The universe and our proteins, right? Our nucleotide sequences. There's a lot in between that happens to understand, and we're still scratching the surface of that. But I think the most tangible way to experience it is through movement. Right? It's like you feel better when you do it. You feel more connected to the world around you, especially when you move in the world around you. And I don't necessarily mean out in nature. Like, it doesn't have to be this, primitive, primal thing necessarily. Just like being connected to having meaning in the movements you do. Embracing a more physical lifestyle, I guess, is what I'm getting at in a lot of ways. Even though our culture teaches us that it's okay to be sedentary, that's just sit all day and then, work our mind really hard and then go home and lay down because we're so tired.
That's Plato.
We didn't actually really do anything, right? Other than burn calories through lots of thought processes. So, I think that a good way to experience a greater, realer sense of the world is through movement. Just feeling, not to say that you have to abandon the life that we're all to a degree brought into, but to just remember that there's a lot of joy and a lot of truth in physicality, in being physical, and being participating in even if it's simple things like, being able to participate in where you source your food, being able to participate in fishing or hunting or whatever your modes or preferences are. I just think participating in your life through being physical is a really important thing.
Yeah.
I was thinking like as the population lives longer, just think of the peace of mind when you're, say, up in your 80s, and my grandmother's 94 almost, knowing that you can still do a lot of things. You never sort of just sat down and accepted that you're getting older, but there's the peace of mind to know you can walk down the stairs or, lift something and take care of yourself. So I think you're right. Yeah, absolutely. You feel better when you're working out and exercising and moving. But I think there's that state of mind that you just, it's hard to imagine not having that when you're older.
It's a fundamental form of freedom and empowerment.
Absolutely.
If one of the major things that limits us in life is fear of movement is a part of that, right? If you are afraid or you don't do things because maybe you're not, fear exists in many different ways, right? Like even if you're just afraid of being uncomfortable, you're not going to participate in your life, and that's going to make you more fearful, more disempowered, right? But if you're not fearful of movement, if you, for your entire life, you're never afraid of doing anything, or most normal things that are a part of a rich, full life, then that's just a really important part of freedom.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it would lengthen the amount of time you can live on your own and not be dependent on a facility or a caretaker. I mean, that's just, like you said, empowering completely. Yeah.
Then more time you could spend playing with your grandkids.
Yep, absolutely.
Playing with your great-grandkids. Passing down memories. And that's one thing we need more of is like more recognition of the importance of quote-unquote old people. More recognition of wisdom and life experience. Like I saw one thing the other day on Facebook that like made me shake my head. I didn't even comment because it didn't even seem like the person would get it, but someone talked about throwing out all traditions and that's what we need to do. That is stupid. Some, but every tradition, that is stupid. That's throwing out the truth with the falsities, throwing out the baby with the bathwater. What you need to do is rationally evaluate them and see which are good, which are not, how to improve things.
Right. I would agree with that, because sometimes we see traditions as silly or not relevant to modern times or anything like that. But at the end of the day, we have to look underneath of the tradition or whatever, the ritual, whatever it is itself, and examine like, well, what was the purpose of that? Yeah. What were these people doing? What were they seeking? What were they looking to discover or care or transmit or whatever?
Yeah. Why did they do that? Yeah. Be scientific about it. Ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, as you both know, I think, Danny and Melanie, people a long time ago, I think some Jewish people knew thousands of years ago that you should wash your hands. And then it became part of the religion. It was a ceremony. It was a rite, stuff like that. There were certain things. I think something is like wash your hands, use certain types of water. There are certain types of water you should not use. If you can't find like clean water, you can use like certain types of sand or dirt. But then, of course, then they're made fun of and things come along and, that's just a stupid tradition. Washing their hands, what does that have to do with anything? Yeah, and then what do we do now?
Yeah.
So, they didn't know exactly why, but they knew it worked. Just like Semmelweis, y'all both know about Semmelweis, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was a physician who learned more like 1800s or so, I forget, that we should wash our hands, and he did a rigorous inductive study, showed that it's valid, but because some doctors and scientists didn't know how to really be good doctors and scientists in some ways, they didn't have good philosophy, they laughed at him, they ridiculed him, kind of maybe I think they might have driven him out of his position as like a professor. And some of them, they said, well, we're gentlemen, we're not dirty, we don't need to do that. I mean, talk about irrational and stupid.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, so much of what we learn and have learned historically as a species has come from just experience, right? Like we've learned through trial and error, like, oh, that didn't work. And if we do this ritual, whatever it is, whether it's washing your hands or whatever, the outcome is better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's kind of the natural way of learning, right? Trial and error. I think that it's also very human to do these like research studies and really just, control variables and figure things out in that systematic way.
Yeah.
But there's also, again, a long history of our ability to decipher by what has stood the test of time, what's allowed us to thrive as a species in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these traditions that we're talking about, we can look at. I agree that we should be examining not only the traditions of like 1 or 2 generations ago, but what about thousands and thousands of generations ago? Like maybe we should re-examine some of these things that have died out, and think like, okay, well, maybe they didn't make a lot of rational sense because they didn't even know why they were doing what they're doing, but it worked in some way. So what is the value there?
Yeah. You got some examples?
I think that just, the worldview of a lot of, ancestral populations, or even, I'm into, as an archaeology type of dude, I did a decent amount of study of Native American Indian populations in the Southwest, some of the philosophy that, that was a part of their culture, the rituals that helped their people bond together, that helped them thrive in a lot of ways in harsh environments and live well. I think there was value in those type of things to examine, like, okay, well, we as a culture have a hard time connecting and finding ethical, good behavior that keeps us, engaged and happy and doing the right thing, not out of fear, but out of a sense of duty, out of a sense of love, out of a sense of community and tribe. Well, what are some of these things that Native people did to encourage real community? There's a lot of things. There's the vision quest. There's the classic stuff that all of us know, and there's a lot of the stuff that we don't know. I think the spiritual connection to the world, all these things are worth examining, in my opinion, even from a modern lens. Like maybe not necessarily to replicate, but to understand what they were doing, mm-hmm. and why it worked for a long time. Anyway.
Yeah. Right. And that's a more scientific approach, asking why instead of just throwing it out.
Yeah, because a lot of this, I personally, one thing that I'm really into, part of my natural movement practice is, for me, is permaculture. Do you guys know what permaculture is?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like
we've studied it in class a bit.
Yeah,
Melanie's kids.
Yeah, yeah.
But go ahead.
That's a little bit my trajectory, is understanding and being at a practice at some level of permaculture, which is really a beautiful, beautiful concept, and it's very scientific in a lot of ways, right? Because mm-hmm. it's taking the idea of agriculture, but instead of focusing on a cash crop, whatever we can sell the most of, we're thinking bigger, we're thinking deeper, we're thinking about how we can create a resilient food system on a piece of land and actually make human habitation a net positive, to where not only are we harvesting food and a variety of food, not just one type of food, but we're actually enhancing the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. We're drawing in animals, we're drawing in fertility in the soil, and we're making human habitation again a net positive, which is a really powerful thing, because I think fundamentally, philosophically, this is a whole other separate conversation. Our nature grooming, one of our superpowers is we are nature's ability to groom itself. If we're able to, a lot of people talk about trying to preserve nature, and that's great. But I think that if we apply ourselves to nature to actually increase biodiversity and do things like permaculture, where our ability to harness food actually helps enrich the world around us, I think that we actualize our role as a species in a lot of ways.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. Like, that's one thing where people could look at the history of ideas and think about, why do we raise cows the way we do? And look at different ways, because it's not like every cow you can look at, like CAFOs versus some grass-fed stuff versus this and that. You can't lump it all together as cows, because that's irrational, because there's very different things qualitatively going on. But why are chickens raised the way they are? Why do we farm the way we do? Why is it a monoculture? Just because it's done doesn't mean it's rational or it's best. Why did that develop? Look back in history. Why do we use fertilizers? Is that really the best? If it's the best, how the hell did things grow for millions of years without fertilizer? And besides, they kind of have their own. And then, what would you say permaculture is, Danny? How would you describe it or define it?
Well, I think it's the design of the land that you reside on that allows for a resilient food system. Resilient includes like a diverse food system, sort of a self-sustaining food system. So it's thinking about the ecology, creating a system of systems that thrive, that allow plants to thrive, animals to thrive, and that you can extract a lot of value from, whether it be fruits. I mean, in a very practical way, it's basically you're creating agroforestry systems. So it's a combination of food systems that aren't just annual plants, right? It's like trees, when you plant them, especially when they're native or adapted well to an environment, are very vigorous, right? And they're going to produce they can produce apples, they can produce pears, plums, whatever, nut trees, perennial herbs that either have medicinal or food value to them. And it's also about organizing and shaping the land to allow those plants to thrive. So you can create, it's really just about manipulating the ecosystem to produce the maximum amount of value and the maximum amount of sustainability or resiliency in that value without having to, just basically extract all the value out of the soil and move on like we've done as a species for a long time, certain populations anyway. We can actually make a particular piece of land or area something that it's not only sustainable, but we're actually as a net making it better, extracting more value.
Yeah. And so some people, and you can look back into the history of why things are done nowadays the way they are. Like, I think people, they try to fake it with chemistry or physics instead of doing what they should is looking at the biology. I mean, you want to grow plants, those are biological things. Well, consider the biology. That's what's fundamental. The physics and chemistry just feed into that. Same thing with the animals. People need to stop, instead of thinking, well, it's all about economics. No. Economics occurs in context of human society, which occurs in context of human life. Life is the fundamental. And that human life occurs in context of an ecology. So that is the fundamental.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Economics should bow to ecology, not vice versa. And of course, there's a short term, and we do got to do certain things to survive. We can't life is short term, so to speak, in terms of the big picture, and we got to take care of ourselves, and we should, as long as we do it, logically and rationally. But it's that big picture that needs to be considered more, and the biology. Then, as you say, if people want productivity, one reason I think some people don't get it is because it's measured wrong. Like from what I've read, you look at one crop growing on land. How much do you get out of it? And as you say, Danny, it's like you got a bunch of crops growing on the land, and from what I've heard, that's not really accounted for in certain measurements of how productive someone is. Well, I got this much spinach out of my land. Okay, well, then they say it's being used better than, you get this much spinach, and then you put a bunch of nitrogen into your water, and then you lose 2 tons of soil during the year, and all this other stuff, versus permaculture where you've got your water, you don't got to import it, it stays there, you don't lose soil, you're growing more, you got spinach, maybe not as much as they do, but it's going to last longer, and then you got apples and oranges and plums and carrots and all this other stuff, and a deer every now and then. There's a lot more value there.
I mean, logically, it makes a lot of sense, even though, if it's really examined, I think actually a lot of people know that. It's just, it's the constraints of an economic system that's based on extreme specialization. And, and really it's not always about the value of the food. A lot of times it's just about how much you can, turn a profit on things.
Misconceptions.
So it's, unfortunately, I think that the incentives are not there for something like permaculture. That's the problem. It's not the logic. I think the logic needs to be out there too. A lot of people aren't aware of it, but even people that are just don't, because there's so many people that want to do permaculture, but outright can't afford to do it. They can't get the land. They can't get it going because it takes a lot of money. And then once you have it, it's not as easy to sell because you're not selling one crop at a mass production that you can sell to companies. You have a variety of things. You can live almost on your own, but is that really the point? Then you're isolating yourself. So there's all these kind of layers that make it very difficult. But if we can, as a species, recognize through science and through just logic, find ways to incentivize, encourage, subsidize, whatever, these sort of things, because they're in the greater interest of our species. In the same way, not relying on fossil fuels exclusively is also, maybe in the beginning, it's not a great proposition to try to switch over to new stuff, but in the long term, it's going to be a great idea to get into things like photovoltaics and solar and all that. It's a great idea. But that's where we're at with things like permaculture. We have to get past that hump. We have to invest in it as a species, as a culture, as a society.
And from what I hear, listening to a lot of people in podcasts and farming, there is a lot of ignorance about it, whether it will actually work and how to do it. I think that's a big hurdle. How do I change? And is that really going to work? I don't believe it. My granddaddy did this. There's, a lot of that from stuff I've heard. And one thing that's interesting is the cost of the land, as you say. Again, if people would look at the history of that, I think part of that is because of how some people have decided to value land use. And so there's been more value put on land for so-called development, building another business that's going to go bankrupt, and then you have an empty building there, building a subdivision, developing a mall or something. There's too much value put on that and not enough for farmers and land, and that's the reason that it's hard for some people to farm or afford it. So I even heard a farmer talking on a podcast recently about, it was recommending you do not buy the land, you lease it. And then you don't got to worry about having to try to recover those costs, which is really hard.
Yeah.
Lease the land, farm, and he talks about how a lot of people who are farming and retiring can't find someone to take it over, and their kids aren't doing it. Well, they just if they could find a young person who'd learn from them and take over the farm, they'd put them in their will.
Totally. But, it's a dying art for sure, and there's a lot of complexity to that topic. It's a big topic for sure. Mm-hmm. But to me, I follow the logic at the end of the day. The logic says permaculture makes the most sense. Mm-hmm. Because if we can look past our human-centric, even economic standpoint, we can see if we're enriching the world around us and rebuilding biodiversity and health and vitality in the world around us, that in and of itself is the answer. We know that, right? There's a double positive there, and that's what we're not fully looking at, and that's what we need to be looking at, because that's again, it's a scientific viewpoint. It's thinking, ecologically, which is different than what we're used to.
And I take a little different perspective on that. I wouldn't say getting away from a human-centric view. I'd say figuring out what that really is. Because if some people think we can stay inside 24/7 and have a bunch of concrete around and all this other stuff, that's what it is to be human, well, they're misinformed and they need to study biology. Mm-hmm. If you're really digging, what is a human-centric view? If they're really scientific about that and they dig into biology and evolution, this is what a human is, this is what a human needs, and then think about, okay, if we need this stuff, what do they need? That would be more like I'll even go out and say it's like selfish. You want to be selfish? Think about what you need. Your spinach, your cow. Okay, what does my spinach need? What does my cow need? Are you really taking care of yourself if you abuse that cow or that spinach? What's going to give me, what's going to give me the best spinach? Rich, good soil that we really take good care of. What's going to give me the best cow? A cow that's happy and on the land and gets to frolic with others and is sunshine so he gets vitamin D and is not sick so much and is good, healthy grass. Or what's the best, like, orange or apple? Something that's not ripe and is shipped to you and gassed up. Gag me with a spoon. The best one is like one that's taken care of and gets to be in an ecology that's appropriate to its nature,
Yeah, that's where I think the logic points to that so strongly. It's just the question is why don't we make these shifts? And I think it's because of what you just said in a lot of ways earlier. Is that resistance? It's that we're stuck in the way we're doing stuff and we're just not being adaptable, right? Like it's a MovNat principle right there, right? Being adaptable to your,
true.
It's like we're so wrapped up in efficiency, we forget about adaptability. It might be efficient to just do things a certain way economically, but we're missing the bigger picture, the world around us, that we're going to fall flat on our face if we don't see the obstacles that we have ahead of us that we need to be able to navigate very well and tactfully.
Yeah, true. And then Danny, true. And then so Danny and Melanie, would y'all agree that one thing people could do is to change what they think about as a career? A lot of people will go to college. Well, don't waste your time going to college. You can go kind of have some free training from some farmers if you promise to take care of their land when they're gone. And then you're doing something good. You got independence. You learn how to do this permaculture, and it kind of takes care of itself. And you can look that up on YouTube. What are some of the things, Melanie, that we looked at in class? Like there's the Purple Pear Farm. There was the 23 or whatever year old food forest. And there's just look up permaculture on YouTube, and there's a bunch of farms you can find.
Sure.
And then you can look up Joel Salatin in the U.S. See what he does. He says he takes such good care of his land. There's times when everyone around him has to truck in water, and they're just suffering. What are we going to do? And then he takes care of his land, so he takes care of his land, so it takes care of him. He's got water all the time. Everyone else is in a drought. Not for him. Take care of it. It takes care of you. But this is a great opportunity for a lot of people. Like the permaculture, biology, MovNat, help, grow up to be a personal trainer, doing MovNat, take that into the schools, take it into retirement homes, bring it into the YMCA, things like that. We need more of that. And then get more gardens going around your own place to have healthier food to help you. Because like we say, it's holistic. You got to have sleep, food, movement, ecology dialed in optimally to function optimally. Because health is, when you really dig into it and you start to study the biology and all this, health is not something we carry around with us whatever. We can go into space and, we're healthy because we're healthy. It's you get a lion, it's strong, it's vital, it's living and thriving. You put it in a little cage, give it 10 years, it's going to be weak and unhealthy.
If even, maybe not even 10 years.
Yeah. So we got to
put a cage around anything and it dies. That's just how it is.
Yeah, true.
Would you guys agree though? Oh, were you going to say something more about that, Jen? Go ahead.
Actually, I'm just going to say I'm going to have to rejoin the call through my phone because my computer's going to die. But
okay.
we'll still have my audio, so we'll continue. Okay?
Okay.
Sounds great.
All right, cool. But yeah, so other folks can farm, movement, study some philosophy to bring some good Aristotelian thought into
I'm back.
Into the culture. Cool. We need more, like E.O. Wilson said, more philosopher scientists who look at the big picture and integrate.
Yeah, I think that's a kind of a theme that we're talking about here is integrative thinking, right? Like,
yeah,
connecting. That's something I learned in school too in Virginia. It's
Good.
like in these intersections between disciplines is where we make a lot of progress.
Yeah.
Instead of just focusing on the isolated discipline itself. I think like anything else, when you specialize, there's a lot of value in that. When you isolate, when you reduce, there's tons of value in that. But there's a lot of equal amount of value in looking at the bigger picture things that are harder to understand because we don't understand them, but actually integrating them. And in a lot of ways, I think that, there's theoretical physicists, right? There's physicists who sort of dream up through and use math to try to figure out like how the universe works and the history of the universe, where it started. And, they use math and they figure out a lot of really amazing things. A lot of ways, I think we need people to be a little more bold. We need like theoretical biologists to try to think about how does this all make sense? How do we put this whole puzzle together philosophically to answer these fundamental questions of life? And even if we're not right, like that's okay. But how do we, I think there are kind of people doing that, but not really. It's not really out there that much.
Yeah,
I think that's
gotta start.
More.
And then they gotta understand that we're more generalists and do some of that. Like this book I'm listening to that's really good about some of that. It's called Range. Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World by David Epstein. He's got a lot of good things about that. Kind of the idea I've thought of a long time, and other people have. It's not like only me, but other people have thought of it decades and centuries ago. That we're not specialists, we're not ants. We should not act like that. We're specialized generalists, and that's the way we should think. Specialize, analyze, but then look at the big picture. How does it relate to everything else? Do we really want to do this? How does it affect
using
other
our whole
things?
Mind.
Pardon?
I mean, it's using our whole mind in a lot of ways too, right? Like being able to dissect and find logic and deduce, and then there's the synthesizing ideas.
Yeah,
and I think that it's a way to live. It's a way to be. For me, I can only speak to my life so far. I'm very fortunate to do the job I have and to be doing what I'm doing. But in a lot of ways, it is a lot of the choices I've made, not just like from a financial perspective, but because like to find something like permaculture and to be able to do this and to be able to teach people movement, like I always just sort of followed not only the logic, but the things I was interested in. And they seem to not really connect in a lot of ways. Like I was studying biology and archaeology, and then instead of doing internships like I should have, I would go help my uncle in the summer build a log house and learn how to be physical. And because it was a feeling too. It was like, okay, I want to learn these skills, but I just feel really good doing this. And I would get comments like, oh, because people would see me doing this hard labor and they're like, you should be in school. And I'm like, I am in school.
Yeah.
But the thing is, at the end of the day, all these things I learned, and every little piece, every little seemingly unconnected thing seems to synthesize in some way and come together. And I think that's not just me. I think that's anybody. If you follow interest and passion, and even if it doesn't there's not like a logical progression behind it, I think that you'll be able to generalize and figure out, whether it's through career or just through your own passion, how to optimally live your life and figure out who you are and what drives you.
And that's what David Epstein talks about in Range a lot. Different examples, different fields, sports, movement, medicine, engineering, scientific work, all this stuff. And this broad range of examples, that's what he finds, is that people who do a bunch of different things are much more effective and creative and productive. So this idea some people have, and it's, again, you can't get away from philosophy. It's right there. Find out who did it. If you think you can that's one reason. Like, look at what these people think and how that is as philosophy, but a lot of people think we got to specialize. What they're doing, I got to like hyper focus on this one career so I can be great. Okay, well, then what you're doing is fracturing reality, and that's not the way it works. You can't break up reality and like hit it like a glass and look at one piece, because the true is the whole, as Hegel said. Hegel was wrong on a lot of things, but that was pretty cool. The whole with the W.
Yeah. I would agree with that, but I think that also maybe there are, as long as that person really feels compelled to do that for that, because it's them, it's because they're so driven to do that, not because of some validation or some insecurity or some external, reason. But if you're intrinsically deeply driven to reduce and be a specialist like that, I think that, again, that's just like connecting to movement, our conversation earlier. Some people just love to run, and they're runners. That's just kind of their body. And it's good to learn a little bit of everything for sure, but some people can just have an incredible aptitude. I think it's a smaller portion of in the population than we give it credit for, but I think there are those people that are just compelled to be hyper specialized, but I don't think it's all of us at all. I think there's some people who can't specialize really at all and are purely almost integrators. I think most people are somewhere in the middle.
I think even there we can't be like a total specialist. You can't get around it. You still got to drive, make decisions, have friends, maybe have family, eat. There's all these different things you got to do as a generalist. Go shot. It's kind of like hunting. You still got to kind of hunt and gather, and you can't get around it. It's like we're not a species where you can be like, maybe there's some kind of ant or something, like one person just runs and does nothing but run, and then everything else is taken care of. That doesn't exist. Every person has to figure out about sleep and diet and health and make some of their own decisions. You can't get around it. So have one or two things that you love. As I say, like we're specialized generalists, just like you don't do everything, Danny. You're into MovNat. You're into movement,
Mm-hmm.
but you still are doing all these other things, and it's not really interfering. People got to learn that it actually adds to it. Someone's a runner. Well, if they're not looking at weightlifting and how to do that well, and diet and movement, and doing some of that on their own, then they're not going to be the best runner they can. Then it's not really going after running as a human being and really valuing it. It's just like an escape value, and you just want to run to like not make any decisions or get away from everything, and that's not really like rational, or it's not really going to be a passionate life that really makes you happy.
Yeah, I think that's the barometer that we are starting to look at, that we haven't for a long time, which is how can movement, how can our life decisions, how we think, how we engage in the world really truly make us happy, not looking at money as the reason for that, the source of that, but our lives, enriching our life. And I think that at all levels, it's the same thing, right? So instead of just being a runner, like you're saying, you'll be healthier to not just be a runner. Mm-hmm. So it's the same with everything.
Like when there's someone who runs a lot, but he's also written, don't know him personally, but I know someone who's like runs a lot and loves running, but he's also like a world-renowned biologist. He's written like 20 books or something like that, made fundamental discoveries about like wasp thermogenesis, how moths cool down, raven intelligence. It's like freaking unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
How do we as parents and educators then maybe give a little help along the way to the kids that are coming up today? This is all great, and as adults we get this, we understand it, but it's something that maybe would you say, Danny, you've kind of come to this later as an adult, maybe not as a kid. You didn't hear about this kind of stuff. You didn't have a lot of exposure, except your uncle. I know you said you did a lot with him, but just would you say that this is something kind of you figured out as you got older? Is it possible for us to help kids kind of start thinking in this way?
I think a lot of kids, for the most part, if you allow them and expose them to this stuff, it really happens naturally. I don't think it's something you have to teach them per se too much. Because again, when you're a kid, you just want to explore and discover. That's like the natural drive that we all have. explore, discover, test, and prod. It's when you start assigning value and teaching kids that only if you're really good at something that you should do it. And if you're not, you lose. We're in it's a cultural thing. We're hyper competitive. We don't see cooperation. We don't see integration as values. So what from a practical perspective, I would say just encourage your kids to try different things, even if they're not good at it. Help them work past some of that natural, like, oh, I'm not good at this, I can't do it. It's like, no, it's okay. That's okay to not be good at things. Like, I'm not good at it either. Look stupid doing this. We as adults have, it comes back to our last conversation. We have to model as adults too. If we're stubborn and afraid of looking stupid or not being good at something, and we show that to our kids that we're like that, that's our ego, right? Like, we have to be okay with putting aside our ego and trying things. And most of the time when we do that, we discover newfound things that really turn us on, even if it's not like, oh, we're going to be the new best person in the world at this, and we have this great natural aptitude at it. We still really enjoy it. Yeah. That's how it was with me for like running, for example, just a really simple movement example. Like, I am not a good runner, especially anything over a mile. I'm much more of a sprinter and just a power type of guy. And I hated running forever because it hurt and I wasn't good at it. And then when I got to MovNat at 30, years old, I relearned how to run. And I just took the pressure off of what my time is and, how fast am I running a mile and how does that rank up to other people? And I'm like, I'm a slow, long distance runner, but if I'm okay with that, I work on my technique, this is actually incredibly enjoyable. I feel so good doing this.
Yeah.
But it's the competitiveness. So I think that if we're talking about the root of the issue, it's we can't change culture in one fell swoop, but we can change ourselves. So it's how do we model our behaviors that our children are watching?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like if you're out for a run, don't be, okay, excuse me, cough. Okay, we have 30 minutes. Okay, now we got to run. Come on, go. No, don't stop. Let's go. Yeah, you're out for a run. Go slow. Stop. Look at some trees and stuff. Look around. Run a little more. Go out where it's nice. Like if you want to run in a subdivision, okay, it's just all you have. But sometimes go to some parks and take a walk or run there. Take a walk. Do some push-ups. Oh, I'm tired. I don't want to do any more. Okay, I'll walk. Oh, man, I feel like doing a few more. I'll do a few more push-ups or whatever. But, totally
just make it fun at the end of the day. Like, make things fun. That's how you encourage kids.
Yeah.
That's the language they understand, is this enjoyment. And that's the language we lose as adults, is enjoyment.
More
sports and competitive sports and all this stuff, instead of as it used to be in PE, where they'd play more and do more individual development stuff.
Yeah, and it's being okay with goalless behavior too. Like, not everything has to have an objective, a goal, an endpoint. That's all related to competitiveness in a lot of ways. There's nothing wrong with that, having goals too, but to just do things purely for the sensation of it, the beauty of it, the fun of it, the joy of it, that happens naturally once you lose the goal, once you lose I have to do things a certain way, or the high degree of planning in general, like over planning things. I think that's a big thing too. Like, everybody's operating on these lists and they're planning out their day, and everything has to be pre-planned. And the second it doesn't go as planned, that's what causes anxiety, and people are really anxious, and we've destroyed the fun and enjoyment out of everything with our planning. Planning, again, inherently isn't a bad thing. In some cases, it's extremely important, but we have to also drop we have to exercise our ability to not plan.
Especially around kids.
Yeah.
They don't understand it so much. Like, a lot of things, we got to realize that a good way I heard this is like from this book. I think it was from this book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk, by Faber and someone, I think. Got the title right. I don't remember the author. But I think it's in there. They say that you need to look at children as Martians or aliens from another planet. They come here. They don't know any of the traditions or customs. You can't act as if they do. They're like totally new and ignorant and just confused about what's going on. And your job as a parent or an adult is to help them learn what goes on in this world. Biologically, chemically, chemistry, physics, socially, politically. That's what our job is with the children. And they don't know what plans are yet. So you got to let them learn that and how they help. But yeah, like as Danny says, they, the way they are, a lot of them their level, they're changing as they age and depending on their level and stuff, but they need to have fun. They need to experience things. They need to move. And then I think it's funny that the way I put this, Danny, is not so much goals, but I think sometimes having so many imposed goals does not let them enjoy or learn to be independent. Because I think goals pop up naturally, like you're curious. You can't help but have goals or things. It's like, oh, what is this? I want to find out. Just let them be free to get their own goals. Because it's just you don't got to impose on it like they're incapable of learning on their own. They need to learn how to learn on their own and learn and be curious and take care of things. Know that they're confident to do it.
So much of parenting I find is really walking the line, right? It's like half of it's getting out of the way and letting them just be. And then the other half is stepping in and guiding with a sense of love and a sense of, you are, that's also a very natural communication that happens, is passing along your wisdom to them in all these different matters of life, right? So walking that line is tough, though, as a challenge, because, especially, again, culturally, we've moved in a direction of hyper managing kids and really being in their face and planning and fear and controlling and keeping them away from environments that are at all risky. All that stuff, I think, really inhibits kids from autonomy, from experiencing the richness of life, finding joy in life, and because of the planning, again, it comes back to that. They don't get exposed to the same degree they don't become generalists. They become specialists because we teach them. We're controlling. We're narrowing their existence too much. Because we're so concerned that they have to, make money or be a doctor or whatever. So that's the challenge, is really walking that line, I think.
That's a tough challenge. No one's ever going to do it right. So we just got to realize we're going to mess up sometimes, so just be okay with it.
There's so much to learn with just observing, kids, though. So much to learn, talk about, well, what does goalless behavior look like? I don't even know what that looks like. Well, remember when you used to go play? When you went and played with your friends, you didn't map out what you were going to go do. You just met somewhere, and then it just sort of happened. You just kind of went with wherever the breeze blew you in a lot of ways, and that. So I think kids' state of consciousness and their reasoning is something that we can all really learn a lot from.
Yeah.
Well, and their self-esteem.
Go ahead.
Their self-esteem. It's an integral part of their growth. They have to have challenges that they can discover themselves, like you were saying, Michael, about let them be, let them find their own goals and accomplish them. And there's nothing that builds self-esteem quicker than I can do this, and I did do it. I didn't think I could. I mean, they don't even know it on that level. I think kids don't. It just starts to build, and they just start getting that sense of assuredness and confidence. And you can tell a person who's got it, and you can see a person who doesn't. And the one who's got it, it'd be great to figure out how, when people have it, what made, how did you get like this? But I wouldn't doubt a lot of it. Just I've seen in the kids I have, there's a lot of that. You have to, like you said, as Danny, as a parent, you got to know when to let them go. And there's a risk, but sometimes that's when they learn. That's how they develop.
Yeah. And then that thing you're talking about is interesting. So, because no parent on earth, at least not good parents, there's good and bad of everything, and there are some bad eggs, bad parents, but no good parent on earth ever wants to have their kid a victim of a crime when they get older. One way they're not going to be that is if they learn self-confidence. I've read some different books about Mindhunter by Douglas, When Violence is the Answer, by Larkin, maybe some other stuff. Criminals, they look for weakness. And I've heard there's cases where sometimes they'll target someone that a lot of people, the general public, wouldn't think, normal people wouldn't think that a criminal would target, like a really deep down career criminal, because sometimes, like in this one book, when violence is the answer, it's about that 1% of the time when it's not social violence. Most of the time, no violence, avoid. But 1% of the time where you got someone who's like asocial and you got to do whatever you can to protect yourself for this rare kind of person, but they look for weakness, and even if it's in someone who's like a guy 200 pounds, sometimes they'll target someone like that instead of some like 100-pound girl, 100-pound woman that is more alert and aware.
Yeah, in our MovNat Combatives course, Vic talks about this a lot too. It's like the same sort of thing. Like, criminals look for soft targets. They're in the business of easy, it's efficiency for them, right? Like, they don't want to deal with someone who's confident, who's going to put up a fight, who has any sort of training or skill or assertiveness of any kind. They don't want that. They want soft targets. So the best way to avoid any sort of conflict is just not to learn how to not be a soft target. And that communication that happens, that nonverbal or verbal communication, that you probably naturally exude, being a confident person, is the best thing you can do, more so than martial arts training or any sort of hand-to-hand combat. It's about not being a soft target. Don't even put yourself on the list just by how it's movement in a lot of ways. It's body language.
That's one thing a parent could do to help their kid, and of course it's not just for that. The important thing is the confidence, their ability to be successful in life, enjoy it, make the most of it. But then it does have this good benefit of helping them avoid being the target of a criminal.
Also awareness. Yeah. Like so many people, part of being a part of the criteria isn't just your own self-confidence. It's if your face is buried in a phone, you're an easy target in a lot of ways. And that's that awareness, just of not a fear-based awareness, but just an engagement with your environment and an awareness of the world around you, is something that I think that is something that is taught and developed to a degree earlier, maybe more so than we give credit for. That's something just like self-confidence, that it's hard to put your finger on how they develop that self-confidence and self-esteem, but awareness and alertness is another quality that's tightly tied to that some kids have and some kids don't. And it can be taught. You could say, okay, don't look at your phone, but there's also just some people are more aware that their senses are more developed and heightened than others. Like there's positive neural pathways associated with listening and looking and feeling and interpreting and analyzing. So anyway, I think that's all part of, there's a lot about parenting that's unwritten and not talked about that really makes a difference when it comes to their ability to thrive in life. Yeah. And a lot of it comes back to, allowing them to engage in their environment, let them do slightly risky things and learn how to be a kid and figure things out themselves.
Yeah. You can teach
and
them,
guide them. Yeah.
Teach them to look up and look around and see what's there, and through questions and guiding and some playing games, you can do a lot of that. So that, because sometimes, like when someone is looking around a lot and will look people in the eye, they're much, much, much less likely to be a target of a criminal. Yeah. No criminal wants to be ID'd. They don't want to be looked in the eye. They don't want someone to know they're there. So if you're walking out from a store to your car and you already have your keys ready to go and you're looking around, looking at the people, the cars, look people in the eye, then you're protecting yourself. And parents can help the kids do that, or like teachers can also, by like asking a bunch of questions. Like I've heard of things, and it comes up in some of these books, when kids are young, like, well, some of these people talk about how when they were young, I think their parents would play a bunch of games and ask, like, okay, how many green cars did you see on the way here? How many blue cars? What was that license plate? How many people are in the store? Just different things like that. To, you might not, a kid might be paying attention to the green cars or certain things and miss the blue cars. Okay, whatever, but at least they're learning to pay attention. Maybe they won't get the question right, but some of them they will. Or maybe you can ask them, how many blue cars were there on the way here? Well, I don't know. Well, were you, like, counting the other cars? Like the other colors or something? Yeah, there were, like, 5 green cars.
Yep. It's guidance, and again, it comes back to modeling, too, Like, I remember distinctly, my dad was a cop, so, cool. Watching his behaviors influenced me a lot, Like, he was just very aware of his environment, Like, when we sat at a restaurant, he would always take the chair that was facing the door so he could see what was going on, Like, if things looked sketchy, he was always aware of it. We would cross the road and stuff, Like, there was just and it wasn't a fear. It was more just a pure awareness. It was probabilities and just intelligence in a lot of ways. It's situational intelligence. Yeah. And that was something that I took on, even as I'm not a law enforcement agent anyway, but I do that not out of fear, but because it's practical, it's intelligent, and it makes me feel safer navigating my world. And there's a certain joy in that too, just being alert and aware. So I think modeling it is a big thing.
Right.
Yeah. And then even if nothing ever happens, and hopefully it doesn't, it's like car insurance, or like fire insurance. It's like, you want the insurance to be there, but you never want to use it. Right. Or like with martial arts, it's like, it's great, and it's good to know the skills, and it helps you be better physically and mentally, and it's good to have the confidence, but you don't want to be in a knockdown, drag-out fight that it's like you die or the other person dies. At least most normal people don't, You never really want to be in a situation where you really, really, really got to fight.
Mm-hmm. And I think all these practices come back to health, too, because it's like, I didn't do martial arts ever for that reason either. Even some of these awareness things, I'm not really that afraid I'm going to get attacked. But there's a certain degree of fine-tuning your organism to be capable. That's timeless. That's beautiful. That feels incredibly good. And that it's self-reinforcing, right? It's like so many martial artists, like you look at even like the traditional Eastern martial arts, they're not even really learning how to fight. They're really doing a lot of practices that are about stilling their mind, bringing awareness and attention to their internal and external environments. And and it's because of, inherently, it's the joy of the practice. There's a lot of happiness and tranquility and equanimity that stems from these type of practices. And there's really something to that. And it's something that what we're talking about right now is how that can be done. Like, that's not just for martial artists. That's for anybody, any organism, to be alert, aware, to be in tune with your environment. It's not just a fear thing. It's a health thing too.
Yeah, it's being true to our nature is like what the motto or whatever of MovNat, and as we should be in general. It's like, as we talked about earlier, it's about being human and doing our humanity. It's like people get carried away in the social thing, and the social aspect of being human is important. We're fission fusion animals, but we got to look at the bigger picture and look at what is it to be a human, and that involves being that is being a certain kind of animal in an environment and an ecology. We can't take that away, like it or not. That's what we are. We gotta, and then when we're true to our nature, just like naturally we'd evolve to have that make us feel better. When we're not true to our nature, there's more diseases and malconditions and psychological problems and everything, and you can see that in zoo animals too. But when we're true to our nature and we're connected properly, we got the proper relationships to our environment with food and sunshine and movement and exercise, hard physical activity, we're going to feel better.
It comes back to our, almost the beginning of our discussion in a lot of ways too. Always. Because,
it is one.
Of course.
The true is the whole.
The true is the whole, for sure. Because again, the root taboo of our culture is nature, is biology in a lot of ways. We are terrified of our own biology and other people's biology. And it's because, there's this sort of unconscious, subconscious, even sometimes very conscious dialogue that happens, or idea that, if it weren't for civilization, we'd be these brutal, unethical, disgusting savages. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, that's an idea in our culture, unfortunately. Right. Wrong.
Right. So, right. Wrong.
Prove it. Show me the anthropological data. Show me the historical data. Because, that's just like Platonic making crap up. There again is where Plato comes up. We got to be Aristotelian. We got to look at the facts. Prove that that's what people would be like. Don't be throwing around crap and making it up.
Right. Or we're so myopic in our history, too. We look, these tribal people in this part of the world, they're doing all this crazy stuff and murdering people. And it's like, well, is that an authentic human environment that they're in? Or are they under a massive amount of pressure in various ways? Our time scale isn't just like the last couple thousand years. It should be our history.
Yeah.
And the problem is we can't go observe and see. We don't really know what happened in a lot of what it means to be in our true nature. But the evidence suggests that we weren't just constantly, totally just warlike, killing people. There's a lot of there's a balance. There's a lot of good. There's certainly the practical aspect of when there's pressure for resources, things happen, and that's a part of being an animal on this planet. But that. We overplay that so much. That's all we see. We see through our cultural lens. The reality is that there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of beauty in nature too. And we need to embrace a lot of what that means, not try to control it all.
Yeah. And then to think that it was brutal back then, but it's not anymore is, I think everyone knows that that's wrong. I think some people, they compartmentalize, have one conclusion about something without really considering the evidence, even though they know it. A lot of unfortunate bad stuff goes on nowadays too. Yeah,
and it's a different kind of
Yeah.
There's never been a time, I don't think, where it's just been like peace and love per se, but it's a different type of struggle we have now. The struggle's in our minds, really, and it's in our bodies too, because of our minds, because of the way we think. Whereas the struggle might have been much more physical in the past. Now it's mental. Mm-hmm. So I think that I do think that we can transcend it, though. Personally, that's my personal opinion. It's an opinion, but I think that with human intelligence, again, if we can actualize our role on this world, we can make it a better place than it even was without us. That's my personal philosophy, though.
Well, I don't know.
Not yours.
I think it's I don't know if it'd necessarily be better. I mean, better for whom and stuff. And I think we develop naturally through evolution in the world. So I don't think it'd be even better or any worse. It's just would be good. But maybe we're just taking a different perspective. But
yeah, I mean, it depends. That's a whole theoretical conversation. It's a good conversation in a lot of ways, but you can look purely from the evolutionary lens and say that intelligence and us as a species is purely just fulfilling a niche. There's no purpose in more intelligence other than filling a niche to be able to fit in an environment and thrive as a species. But there does seem to be this general trend in nature toward higher and higher levels of awareness. And if we think of nature, this is a permaculture idea of us being nature experiencing itself or grooming itself. I think there is something to that train of logic, I don't think it can be totally dismissed personally with that.
Yeah, it's complicated, and there's so much still to learn about all that. It's
right.
Biology, psychology, neurology, physics, chemistry. A lot of this integration needs to be done. It's
the jury's still out. The jury's still out for sure. That's one of the beauties of it all is, we'll see.
Because, yeah, I think definitely, because people have choice and free will properly understood, people can really make the world worse, and you see that, or we can be more consistent with it. And I wouldn't really call that, though, maybe it's just a different perspective. I wouldn't really call it making it better, but just being natural.
Yeah, I think if we're true to our nature, if we allow kids to be true to their nature, and we as adults are true to our nature and teach kids in a way that is healthy, you could even say spiritually connected to the world, I think that we would see a lot different of outcomes. There's no, I don't have any grand idea that there would be perfect peace and harmony in the world necessarily.
Yeah, I don't think there ever will because of human nature.
No, but that's not. I think that's more of an outlier thing though than a. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that's gotten out of control. Personally, I think that historically, things that and things that aren't healthy and not good for the species and for the greater world have sort of taken over in some ways. But I don't think that's our true nature as a generalization of humans, is that we're going to just destroy everything and make bad decisions. I think that's just what it's become because of the culture in a lot of ways, or just because we're on this path and we still haven't really understood ourselves yet.
Yeah, because that's one thing about people. Since we're fission fusion, very social animals. One fact we can learn from learning about other social animals and fission fusion animals. I don't remember if I mentioned this last time, but people can look it up on YouTube. But we're just like this. We're not any different. There's a chimpanzee somewhere people were studying. She put a piece of straw in her ear for some reason. Maybe there was something itching and she didn't want to take it out, or I don't know. But put this piece of straw in her ear, and some of the other chimpanzees started to do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's that group cohesion thing, and that's what's going on with some ideas now. It's just, even though they're wrong, they do have one function. They help with social cohesion. They show that where some people are committed to each other in the group, and the thing is, that's always going to be the case. It's just a matter of doing that right. It's part of our nature, nothing wrong with that. But what we want to do is do that right, and I don't think everybody can ever do that. That's more complex and difficult, and there's always some people are always going to be, because we're social, there's always some place for power among everyone.
Well, I think that's what has been figured out, honestly.
What do you mean?
In culture, is that instead of trying to just, if somebody is power hungry and wants to has some sort of complex that I think isn't a part of our true nature necessarily, but some sort of insecurity or whatever, it's a lot more powerful instead of trying to be physically violent to try to control people through social hijacking in a lot of ways, through manipulating people's minds. So
yeah, I think people have been doing that for thousands of years, and it's because it's in our nature. You don't have to know we're fission fusion or anything like that to do it. It's just, it's there.
Yeah.
Just like you don't got to know everything about bacteria or all this stuff to know that washing your hands is something we should do.
Right. Yep. No, it's a part of who we are. There's no doubt that we learn socially. I think that because of our divorcement from nature, our true nature and nature itself, we lose the ability to supersede some of these things and follow logic. It's like, okay, what I learn, I should also cross-check with logic, right? That's I think a lot of what you are talking about all the time, right? I can't just take for granted what I learn. I need to actually figure out and cross-check this with logic itself. And that's what a lot of people, so many people, even really, really smart people, don't do.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because we're not taught to do it anymore. We just take everything for granted because there's so much. Our world is so complex now. But, that's what marketing is and all that, is it preys on our lack of diligence to and I think it's getting better though. I think it's people are starting to become more aware. Like, hey, maybe I should check this out because I've been duped so many times with these stupid things, and which is great.
Infomercial? Are we talking about here?
Bought another.
You have to be your own advocate. You really do.
Yeah, don't do it anymore, Danny. Are you ever going to learn? Stop doing it, Danny.
I bought my 5th Snuggie online. Gets me every time at 2 a.m.
Well, it's okay. I'll tell you a secret. I've got like 300 pet rocks.
No.
Is that right?
Sea monkeys.
No. The Ginsu knife. It slices, it dices.
Yeah.
We all have our vulnerabilities.
Yeah. But yeah.
So true.
We gotta keep those things there and appreciate them, but just bring reason and logic into play and think about them. Because we're fusion animals, we've got to do more of that fission.
You've said that a few times. I have heard that term, but it's been a really long time. Could you define that? Fission fusion?
Fission fusion is like a type of society or adaptation or characteristic of social animals in which they can live in large groups or live alone or in smaller groups. And they'll change throughout the day. It's not got to be like a large group all the time or a small group. Like sometimes, you got wolves are in packs, pretty much that way. Not a lot of them are really alone. Some like cheetahs, they live alone a lot more. That's the way, their lifestyle, the way they hunt, the way they live. Lions live in prides. But some animals, chimpanzees, bats, people, we got some of the others right now. Do you remember any others, Melanie?
Oh, yeah, I know. I was just looking it up. Well, you said wolves. That's what I always think of right away.
Wolves are not.
Coyotes.
Oh, yeah, coyotes. Coyotes.
So it's a reference to group dynamics?
Yeah, it's like we can and we do live alone or in small groups and then go into large groups sometimes. We can go back and forth between both. We don't got to be only alone or in small groups or only in a large group.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one reason why, from what I've heard, like in reading this book, Coyote America by Dan Flores, a lot of cultures have looked at coyotes in ancient human history as being like feeling like avatars and being kind of like godlike kind of things. And I think, a big reason for that is because they're like us in that respect, being fission fusion.
Mm-hmm.
They live in groups, they work with that, and they live like that, and they can also be alone or in small groups and function well.
Cool.
So, that's the idea. So, that's why, I think that's like the biological basis of why a lot of people want to belong and be in a group. But we're also like, don't tell me what to do.
Right. Yeah. It's that playing out, that part of us, fission fusion. That makes sense.
Yeah. Take the best of each one.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Cool. It's so funny. We really didn't talk about movement that much this time.
Well, it's in there. It's implicit, but not as much, more philosophic. Hopefully, And then one thing people could do is, we talked about modeling. I think, we modeled some good thinking here also. People could just think about what we did and how and why. And bring that into play in their classrooms and their own minds and in their parenting and their businesses. As we talked about, there's a lot of ideas, hopefully, that people learn. If someone is listening to this and they know everything, thank goodness. Everything we talked about. But I think, hopefully, there'll be some or a lot of new things for some people in here. But
ask a lot of questions and think about things from the evolutionary lens. I think that's two good takeaways.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I think I'm really excited to see, like you've already mentioned, like biologists become philosophers, integrators, because that's this evolutionary ancestral health and just understanding of the world, it's finally like putting together the big picture of like us as animals, as our deeper history, and trying to answer these deeper questions with that logic, that train of logic in mind. And you know, I'm excited to see what people smarter than myself really come to the conclusions.
Yeah.
But I'll always be asking those questions myself because it's really enriching. You know, it's like that's what's led me to MovNat. Is that type of logic has brought so much, like that to me. Again, going back to like I cross-check everything. The barometer of something's value and success is health to me. What makes me feel the most vibrant, vigorous, calm, tranquil, able to handle stress, able to give love, all these things that are associated with health, like that's how I judge the value of something like MovNat, something like permaculture, things like, you know, guiding your kids, all these topics we're talking about, that evolutionary lens, it checks out to me every single time. How can we become truer to our nature? In a lot of ways, even like when you look at what Zen training is and all that kind of stuff, it always goes back to that same idea of going back to your true nature. What have we lost in our overly abstract thinking? Not that that's bad. All that stuff is really good, but how do we get back to basics?
Yeah, and I'd say, having studied philosophy and all that, you know, I got a degree in philosophy and I'm an educator, so this is important to me, but I don't think it's so much overly abstract, but I think just a wrong philosophy, a wrong epistemology, a wrong theory of what abstractions are. The influence of Plato and Immanuel Kant and John Dewey on our culture. You know, Dewey was basically a disciple of Immanuel Kant, and they're both kind of wacko. Like, for Plato, to do science, you need to turn away from the evidence of the senses because they're misleading. You need to turn in and just think about things on your own. And I, for one, would not want a neurosurgeon to work on me that did that. You know, he's got these cool ideas in his head and he's made stuff up, but he's never worked on anybody. Has never studied the body at all. Any animals, doesn't know anything about biology, never been outdoors, never done any anatomy, doesn't know how the heart works. But he's got these cool ideas in his head. Hell no. For someone to design a bridge like that, no thank you. But that was more like Plato's idea about science, and that's like very anti-science. Science is about the evidence of the senses in the real world. Aristotle got it right. But because of that influence and how he influences us in school, you know, people ask in math, when are we ever going to use this? Or in science, when are we ever going to use this? And there's not a lot of explanation. And again, looking at the evolution of ideas and the history of them and asking why. Why has that happened? Because of Plato. You look at it, you trace back the idea, it comes from Plato. Turn away from the evidence of the senses, turn away from reality. Well, then what are you going to be asking is, when are we ever going to use this? You know?
Right.
Will you explain it? How does it come up in experience? Well, for Plato, experience doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's the interface of both, right? It's like, how can we marry the abstract and the concrete? That's what really the power of our mind is, right? How do we take these concepts and make them meaningful? Because that's the purpose of them. That's why we think that way to begin with, right? So that we can survive and live better. Yeah.
It'd be a matter of, seems like evolution would develop something that allowed us to have a different perspective on concrete things and organize them and work with them better to be more efficient. You know,
permaculture. Yeah.
Whereas, you know, that's another reason why Plato's wrong is like what he has to do is nothing about evolution. It's like it doesn't make sense in evolution for something like that to exist. It's like ludicrous.
Right.
But
it is a superpower of our mind to be able to do that, though. To even be able to think divorced of the senses in a lot of ways.
Ever really can.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No. You are much more well studied in this. I think. I guess my perspective. it's really the same perspective. So I won't reiterate too much. But you know,
it's like we can say so many like of the same thing in different ways.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. So
you might think we disagree, but we don't.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think like when you look at fiction works and everything, I've read some stuff about people who've studied that. It's always like invariably always in terms of what we already know, just rearrangements of that. There's never just something totally divorced from what we know.
Yeah. That's totally.
But,
you got that's I won't even go down that route.
Yeah,
rabbit holes. But yeah.
Another show.
Another show
On that.
One thing about Aristotle that's interesting too. I don't know if you know this, Danny, but did you know he was a great biologist?
Aristotle.
Mm-hmm.
He's a great biologist.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, evidence of the senses, that is biology.
Well, but I mean, he studied
like
biology.
A field biologist? He's like a field biologist.
Yeah, he was like, even Darwin, someone sent him some of Aristotle's works, and Darwin was just amazed at how organized and in-depth it was. At the time, of course, Aristotle was wrong on a lot of things. We've learned a lot since then, naturally. If he was alive now, he could do a lot better and a lot different, but he probably pretty much started biology. And it seems like the way he did things, he was very into the ecological view. He'd always look at something in context.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read like a lot of books I listen to, written by biologists. I mean, I hear time and time again, all over the place from all these different biologists about how they're impressed with Aristotle.
Yeah, well, yeah, totally. I guess the thing that keeps coming back into my mind about Plato is, and I'm not anywhere near as well studied, so I'm asking in a lot of ways. I think of the power of his train of thought is that it's really about the understanding the essence of things in a lot of ways, right? Like the classic example is the circle. Like the perfect circle doesn't exist in nature, but it exists in our minds, and we can use that to help understand nature. So there's this essence of a circle, and what is that essence? And in a lot of ways, when you look at like quantum physics and stuff like that, you start to see like, okay, well, fields govern a lot of forces in nature, right? So are those fields those essences that are a part of our mind? So I guess that's the train of thought that I think of that maybe has some value to it, but I'd like to hear your opinion on that.
Okay, so Plato, he was a genius. There's no denying that. Damn genius. I think he single-handedly invented philosophy from what I've heard and from what I've seen and studied. So he was the first one ever to have a totally integrated system of thought and to, I think, define what the fields were. Like politics, metaphysics, some epistemology. And he was a Greek, so he enjoyed and loved life. And, coming from, there's all the tradition he followed and learned from the Socrates and I forgot what they're called now, but there was a bunch of private tutors in Greece that did some really good work. Socrates started questioning, the Socratic method. He started a little bit about defining terms, thinking about what things were. And then Plato came along and did some great work. However, the thing is, he's wrong on pretty much all his answers. Politics, totalitarianism, he laid down the blueprint for Nazi Germany and communist Russia and communist China in the Republic. Laid down total, a system of total control where the quote-unquote philosopher kings rule. And I've heard some people argue, well, maybe he didn't really mean it or something like that, but yeah, that's what it's used for. And, what he thought about epistemology and logic was totally wrong. What an idea was, what an essence was, it's like all in your head. You know, that's what we call, when someone's like that, that's what we call crazy. And then, you know, Aristotle came along, and he was a lot better. Of course, he still made mistakes. No one's perfect. He still maintained Plato's idea of essence, but instead of being some kind of thing in La La Land, he thought it was in the world. So there'd be like a rabbit essence in every rabbit, and a person essence in every rabbit. I mean, a person essence in every person, not rabbits. Please no. So at least he's got his focus on the real world. But I mean, you know, some things are damn difficult to figure out. And I think a more recent philosopher, some people like, some people don't. I don't care. You need to study her epistemology. But I think Rand got it right when she defined objectivity as, okay, so for Aristotle, objectivity was more like, I forget how it would be actually defined, but thinking in accordance with the way things were. But for Ayn Rand, she identified that thinking is like objective thinking is thinking in accordance with the way things are, following the rules of a rational consciousness. There's like both aspects need to be considered. Because a lot of people had the idea of like, as if they didn't know any better. You know, it's like, so there's these bad ideas from before that still influence us. It's like the mind is like some mirror, and it just like reflects things. But no, it's like it's got a nature. Consciousness is a processing function of an animal. We process things, and reason is more powerful processing. So, you know, objectivity is following the rules of how we should process things correctly in accordance with the way things are. So there's, you know, the logic would be the way we should do it. That's just identifying, how we should do things correctly, how we function well, and therefore are healthy and following our nature. And then there's the aspect of acting in accordance with the way things are, like their nature and their cause-effect relationships. You know?
And so where did Plato get it wrong from that regard of subjectivity and objectivity?
Okay, well, remember, he was thinking that ideas were just in our head, and he like reified things instead of grasping, because it's difficult, you know. But I sure the hell wouldn't have figured it out on my own, no damn way. But Plato thought of like an essence is just like something that we're like aware of, and it's a pure idea. We've got an idea that's a reflection of some other pure idea.
A lot of people would associated that early on with like God and stuff, right? Didn't they?
Like, how do you mean?
Culturally, like there was a shift to, I think wasn't a lot of this type of philosophy a justification of God, like the pure essence of things. It comes from God or something like that.
Okay. I'm not going to get into religion. People can believe what they want. I'll talk about history. Sure. Okay.
No, I'm talking historically. That's how it was.
Historically, right. Okay. I respect people's consciousness. As long as they're rational, logical, and good, and treat me well, I'll treat them the same. Okay. But, like Plato was a big influence on the early Christians. And it wasn't until St. Thomas Aquinas, there was the Renaissance, Greek works are being reintroduced through the Arabians into Europe. It's starting, I don't remember exactly, like 1100s, 1200s. There's a little bit, and then it develops, and St. Thomas Aquinas does more. So people think Columbus discovered the earth was round. No. He knew the earth was round from reading the ancient Greeks, and that's why he knew he could be successful. Copernicus came up with the idea of heliocentrism. No. Copernicus read the ancient Greeks, and Aristarchus had the idea that the earth goes around the sun, and then Copernicus started working with that. So originally, the Christians were very influenced by Plato and brought his thinking into their thinking. And then, as I said later on, Aristotle was introduced more into Christianity in the West.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question or not? Or
yeah, I was just making the observation that I think that a lot of Platonic type thinking was influenced early religions.
Yeah, like his idea of the good. And then, if you look back further, it's interesting. Like a lot of cultures worship the sun or water because they know they're so fundamental to life and so important. Mm-hmm. But and I'd have to look it up. I'm not sure if this is actually legit, but it seems like Plato's idea of the good might have developed as an abstraction away from the sun.
Mm.
Like the sun god and the good and warmth and life. And you kind of develop the idea of like this something being good for humans and something we strive for and all this.
Right. Well, we have gone down the rabbit hole for sure.
We've gone down a bunch of rabbit holes.
I love it, but I could do that forever.
We've flown around in the trees like birds and up and above the trees, and we've gone down in rabbit holes and wormholes and like real worms, not physics wormholes, but wormholes.
Right.
But
it's all interesting to see how it connects to some of the beauty of our civilization and culture and some of the areas where it still needs work, So yeah. I think that's what we're talking about here in a lot of ways, is just that where we can improve in our logic and where some of those lapses, maybe we're still stuck on old ideas that went through an evolution and are continuing to go through an evolution since the Greeks. We can't necessarily get stuck on anything, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Different people have different things to offer. We got to not throw things out like Chinese, African, Indian, Native American. We got to look all over to see what we can learn, not just throw it out. And that's one thing some people need to realize too. Some people praise or condemn the West, but the West is, if you look at its history and where the idea comes from, it is influenced by every culture. It is like kind of
melting pot.
Yeah, like an integration of things from India and China and all this stuff.
Yep.
We've been going for a long time here, so yeah, we better wrap it up a little bit. Any last words, Danny?
No, it's been a great conversation. It's my hope that in addition to movement, exposure to concepts like permaculture just helps inspire others to, just look a little deeper into these type of things. Because if you're interested in movement, if you're interested in logic, I think ultimately it's really good. It's super important to work on your mind and how you think, but I think action, at the end of the day, what you do is what really matters. That's how you're etching yourself on the world. So not to say everybody has to become a permaculture person, but even if any of these evolutionary, logical type things that you put into practice in your life, modeling for the next generations, understanding and thinking these patterns that you're transmitting to your kids, or at least exposing them to, even if they don't become indoctrinated or anything like that with it, are really good things. So that'd be my final synthesis of this conversation.
Yeah, I like your idea of like the logic. Remember, logic is, I like your idea that logic is important, and we should really dig into that and not have some of the misconceptions that are in this culture about what logic is from Plato or Kant or whoever, like symbolic logic crap. But remember, logic is how our mind functions properly. It's a matter of how we connect to the world. Just like we want to move and be fit and be biomechanically correct. Well, there's some like theory to that, and logic is just a theory of how we know and make valid conclusions, and what's wrong with that? It's a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's one step closer, and in actualizing and developing as a species our potential to live good lives and do good in this world.
Yeah. And then, the idea you have about acting. There's some quote from someone, I don't remember the whole thing now, something about those who only dream, something like that. You shouldn't just dream, you should dream and take action.
Well, it goes back to what you said before we started this conversation live, which is being well and good.
Yeah, true. That's funny.
See, I'm an integrator by nature.
Yeah. But then one thing I'll throw in here. You were talking earlier about, I don't remember, something about, maybe it was with specializing or logical or something, but one thing that is going to happen, like, no matter what one does, the world is still all interconnected. But yeah, I think you were talking about learning different things. That's one thing people can learn from teachers, parents. Some things might seem isolated and you're doing this and you're doing that. It might seem like there's no logic to it, but the world is interconnected. Everything is all causally related. So there's going to be some cause-effect relationships, and therefore there's going to be some logical relationships you're going to find.
Yeah. In hindsight, it always makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And so that you almost have to suspend it is a paradox in a way. I agree with that. Like, it's like, oh, what's the logic behind these random things I'm doing? All the logic is follow your health and happiness.
Yeah.
Follow what drives you. But any natural curiosity you have to discover and understand this world is going to benefit you tremendously in the long run. It's always a net positive. It's never the wrong route.
Or people could say, why are you doing this? It doesn't help your career. Well, reality is related, and I'll figure it out later. Everything in reality is related. Hegel says the true is the whole, and I'll figure it out later.
That's right.
Any last words, Melanie?
Thanks, Danny, for joining us again, bringing all your experiences and
your wisdom, your love, your passion, your logic.
You got it.
I'm sure we'll put a lot of notes, linking to your sites and stuff. So that'll be in the show.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. You're welcome. Let's do it again.
And yeah, some of the questions you say are good for every person, adult, parent, teacher, student. Some of the things you mentioned earlier, Danny, like ask why.
Mm-hmm.
Why, how does it come up in our evolution? Some of the stuff we talked about before. How did this develop? Where does it come from in our history? What's the history of this idea?
Mm-hmm.
Think about the fact that we need to look at detail, and we need to look at the whole. We need to be holistic. Be a specialized generalist.
I think any healthy mind functions that way. I think that is our true nature.
Yeah. True. So cool.
Amen to that. Thank you so much again. It's always a pleasure talking to you both, and hopefully we mined out some good ideas and, are part of living a good life.
Amen, brother.
Ditto.
All right, guys.
All right. Thank you. Much appreciated, Danny.
All right.
All right. Take care. Yeah, bye-bye.